Good evening. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Paul Andrews, your Master of Ceremonies, and I'd like to welcome you today as we pay tribute and remembrance to the crew of Spirit 03, who paid the ultimate sacrifice on this day 30 years ago during Desert Storm. The key speakers for today's ceremony are Commander, Air Force Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Slife, Lieutenant General Highhold, retired, and Chief Master Sergeant Walter, retired. At this time, I would like to introduce some very honored guests, 8 families representing the crew of Spirit 03. The Blands, Mays, Biggies, Harrisons, Blessingers, Schmauses, Grimms, and Galvins. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce Chief Master Sergeant Bill Walter, retired, former AC-130 gunner, who's done so much for the AC-130 community. Currently assigned as GS-13, Air Force Special Operations Command, Gunship Requirements, Inspector Association Historian. Chief?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. As you said, I'm Bill Walter. I've been part of the gunship community for 42 years, believe it or not. This gray hair and scruffy beard ought to prove that, I guess. At least Jerry would say so. I'm the Inspector Association historian, and tonight I'm going to present a brief historical synopsis of the AC-130 activity during Operation Desert Shield and Storm, with special emphasis on the events of 31 January 1991. Now, for some, this narrative is well known. For others, it might be the first time they've heard the story of Spirit 03 from an operational perspective. Looking back 30 years, an international crisis began in August of 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait. To prevent further aggression and to end their occupation of Kuwait, a coalition of 35 countries was formed, with the United States being the largest component. Of this, AC-130 gunships and crews arrived on King Fahd International Airport, Saudi Arabia, in September of 1990. The airport was located near Dammam, about 120 miles from the Iraq-Kuwait border. We found the desert was nothing like anyone had seen before. Weather conditions were harsh and terrain was desolate. The heat was oppressive, almost intolerable, routinely exceeding 120 degrees in the middle of the day. Escape from the heat was impossible, prompting crew chiefs and specialists to restrict their work schedule to nighttime hours. During the day, maintainers slept in the airport parking garage on cots and pallets of supplies. Most aircrew were holed up in the abandoned manufacturing and building company compound about 4 miles from the runway. The wall compound was equipped with 16 modular trailers filled with window air conditioners that ran constantly to keep the overall room temperature down to about 85 to 90 degrees. Stray cats ruled the compounds. Hunting rats seen scurrying around the compound every night, which we found quite entertaining. Flying operations and proficiency training was difficult. There was no escaping the heat, and even at 10,000 feet altitude, air flowing through the unpressurized AC-130 felt like it was coming out of a convection oven. Towards the end of November, boredom and complacency continued to be major hurdles to contend with, but morale improved as the outside temperature dropped. Crews spent less time holed up in their rooms and more time outdoors. By Christmas time, it was cold and rainy and everything turned to mud. Crews gathered around a central burn barrel they called the rumor fire to entertain themselves and, of course, create mischief. In early January 1991, Major Weaver's crew arrived in country to replace a crew that was rotating out for training. Crew members were Aircraft Commander Major Paul Weaver, Navigator Captain William Grimm, Electronic Warfare Officer Captain Dixon Walters, Fire Control Officer Captain Arthur Galvin, Co-Pilot First Lieutenant Thomas T.C. Bland, Jr., Sensor Operator Senior Master Sergeant Paul Biggie, Lead Gunner Master Sergeant James Jimbo May III, Gunner Technical Sergeant Robert Hodges, Gunner Technical Sergeant John Olschlager, gunner, Staff Sergeant Timothy Harrison, sensor operator, Staff Sergeant John Blessinger, illuminator operator, Staff Sergeant Mark Schmaus, flight engineer, Staff Sergeant Damon Kanua, gunner, Sergeant Barry Clark. In early January of 1991, Saddam Hussein was threatened with military action if he didn't withdraw from Kuwait by 15 January. He didn't budge, so the air war phase of Operation Desert Storm began on 17 January. At that time, 4 AC-130 gunships and 6 crews were on station. On 18 January, the Iraqi army launched Scud missiles into Israel. The Bush administration feared the coalition would fall apart if Israel was pulled into the war. From that point on, AC-130 mission tasking morphed into nighttime armed reconnaissance missions deep into Iraq to hunt for Scuds. The mission was not a good fit for the AC-130, let alone any low and slow aircraft. After nearly losing 2 gunships to radar SAMs on 21 January, AC-130 mission focus was shifted to armed reconnaissance of the Saudi, Kuwait, Iraq border areas. On 29 January, Iraqi forces crossed the Kuwaiti border into Khafji, Saudi Arabia. The assault happened so quickly that 2 Marine reconnaissance teams were trapped in the city. Both teams holed up in buildings for about 8 miles south of the border, hiding from Iraqi forces during the duration of the battle. The same night, AC-130 gunship Ghost 02 was diverted from airborne alert to Khafji. They were engaged by targets and a man-pads. They were engaging targets and were engaged by a man-pads missile that self-destructed several hundred meters off the tail of the aircraft. The next night, Spirit 02 and Spirit 01 were assigned missions, while Major Weaver's crew was on ground alert waiting for tasking as required. Just past midnight, Major Weaver's crew was alerted to fly a Saudi range to functional check aircraft 567's fire control system, which had just been repaired. Assigned the call sign Spirit 03, Major Weaver's crew was airborne at 0216 hours on 31 January. Meanwhile, Spirit 01 was returning to King Fahd, and Spirit 02 was engaged in combat operations north of the Saudi border near the Al Wafra forest. At about 0400, Spirit 02 was dealing with heavy AAA and man-pads threats. Most of their time was spent dodging hostile fire with little ability to return fire or engage targets. In response, Spirit 02 pulled off target and headed towards a holding area to wait for a more manageable target assignment. At about the same time, Spirit 03 had finished their systems checkout and reported to a nearby holding point over the Persian Gulf. By 4:34, both Spirit 02 and 03 remain in holding with no workable targets available. By then, Spirit 02 had about 1/2 hour of fuel remaining, and Spirit 03 had about 2 hours of fuel. Spirit 02 advised Spirit 03 to return to base, but Major Weaver decided to remain on station in case a workable target area became available. Finally, at 5:40, with a little bit more than a 1/2 hour of fuel remaining, Spirit 03 received tasking from a Marine OV-10 forward air controller, call sign Peach 75. The crew was directed to search and engage Iraqi vehicles and troops coming down the coastal highway north of Khafji. At this point in the narrative, the following synopsis is based on Spirit 03's cockpit voice recorder, which we recovered from the crash site in March of 1991. Spirit 03 arrived over the target at 10,000 feet altitude. Sensor operator Senior Master Sergeant Biggie and Staff Sergeant Blessinger searched for targets. Within about a minute, Blessinger detected a column of vehicles on the highway traveling south. Weaver established a firing orbit, but the aircraft's fire control system failed. While Captain Galvin began troubleshooting procedures, Peach 75 redirected Spirit 03 to the Saudi Customs border checkpoint. Suddenly, Captain Walters received a radar SAM warning, but determined it was a false alarm. Since their fire control system was problematic, Major Weaver then descended down to 9,000 feet to decrease variables. Once Captain Galvin repaired the fire control computer, Spirit 03 began to score direct hits on the border post buildings with both 40 and 105 millimeter guns. By 0614, sunrise occurred at ground level and Spirit 03 was low on fuel. Finally, at 0619, the AWACS passed a recall order to Spirit 03. First Lieutenant Bland relayed the information to Major Weaver, who acknowledged the order but continued to engage targets. Now, with Spirit 03 critically low on fuel, Peach 75 asked Spirit 03 to search for a suspected Frog 7 rocket near water tanks along the coastline. Captain Grimm advised Peach 75 they were going to take a quick look, then had to depart. Spirit 03 searched down the coastal highway, ultimately finding two vehicles parked in the middle of the road north of Kofje. Both sensor operators and the FOCO determined the vehicles were not frogs and did not engage either vehicle. By 624, Spirit 03 was below the NAV's calculated mingle fuel level, and it was 10 minutes after sunrise at ground level. At that time, Major Weaver decided it was time to depart. Captain Grimm passed the pilot a rollout heading of 210. 2 seconds later, a muffled explosion was heard coming from the left wing. 15 seconds later, 2/3 of Spirit 03's left wing broke off and the aircraft crashed into the Persian Gulf, vanishing under the water surface. Efforts to locate the crash site were difficult. Reconnaissance aircraft photographed the area where AWACS last tracked Spirit 03, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Some felt it was as if the aircraft had disappeared into thin air. Morale hit rock bottom while AC-130s were assigned an airborne alert commitment until 4 February when it was reduced to ground alert. By March 1st, the ground war phase was over and an organized grid search began to search for Spirit 03. Some held out hope that the aircraft had crash landed and survivors would be found, but others felt the aircraft had crashed near Kofje. First South Commander George Gray III directed a maximum effort aerial search near Kofje. Finally, on 4th of March, 1991, the wreckage of Spirit 03 was found in about 600 yards offshore underwater north of Kofje. May they rest in peace.
Thank you, Chief Walter, for those remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce our next key speaker, former commander, 16th Special Operations Squadron, former commander, Air Force Special Operations Squadron, Air Force Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Bradley Highhold, retired. Sir?
Okay, there we went. Took a second to get unmuted. Thanks, Chief, for that bit of history. And thanks, Colonel Andrews, Colonel Murphy, for setting this up. I think this is something that sets a lot of us apart from a lot of other squadrons, is that we revisit this history and we honor those that have fallen, beginning back to the Vietnam era, quite frankly. It's really an honor to be with all of you here tonight, just to make a few comments primarily to the family members, which frankly, I'm just startled by the number of family members that we've had join us tonight. As I watch the participants click up at the bottom of the page here, we've got 233 people participating. It's, don't think I've ever been in a ceremony with quite this large, with this many gunship folks involved in it. So it truly is an honor. I think it's ceremonies like this that are evidence that we just don't forget our past. We don't forget those that gave their all for the noble cause called liberty. And I think it's safe to say to all of the crew members out there that at least this occurred to me, so I'm going to assume it did with you as well, that on your first combat mission, you lay there in your bed and you wonder, You're going to go off on that combat mission. Are you going to come back? And you start thinking about it a little bit. It gets on your head. And then you come to this conclusion that it is worth it. This noble cause called liberty and ensuring the freedoms of our country are worth giving your lives for. And once you've had that epiphany and once it's hit you, the rest of the missions from that point on are easy. But I'm sure that the crew members of Spirit 03 had that at some point prior to going into their combat mission. But I'm here to tell the families that once they've done it once and they squared it in their mind, that the cause is worth it. It's easy, trust me. To the family members of Spirit 03, and I'm comfortable saying this on behalf of Gunship Nation, I'll call it. We will never forget your loved ones that were lost 30 years ago. They were your husbands, they were your sons, they're your brothers, they're your dads, your uncles. They were our brothers in arms, and they were true friends to so many that you see on the net right now. I mean, true friends. And I'll tell you, for sure I know this, we will honor them until our last breath on earth. And then we will join them and see them once again for all eternity. That is, of course, if they haven't overstayed their stay and not allowed any of us up there because they've had ghost riders in the sky playing 400 times a night in the hooch bar. Some of us may not be allowed up there. But I'm here to tell you, when we do join them, again, it will be for all eternity. They may be gone from our sight, but I'll tell you this, they're not gone from our hearts, none of us. I served alongside all 14 of these airmen, and many others like them for 44 years of my life. And now that I'm retired from military service, I can tell you one thing. I've come to a realization that the best and the brightest are not on our college campuses, and they are certainly not in the corporate boardrooms of this nation. The best and the brightest are the ones that are wearing the uniforms of our military service. They have the moral and they have the physical courage to defend this imperfect union that we have, just as those in Spirit 03. I know without a doubt, without one doubt, the warriors of Spirit 03 were indeed our nation's best and our brightest. They chose to stay, as Chief said, amid certain danger, to finish the job, to never leave a fellow warrior behind, in this case, our Marine. They did not falter, they did not fail, they embodied our creed. And today, just like it was 30 years ago, I can tell you family members that are out there, just like 30 years ago, we have the most lethal force on the planet. And today, it is fueled by young people that will do the same. They will give their lives, if necessary, to protect our freedom. I have full confidence in them, and I'm confident you do as well. I have to tell one short story. The last five of my last 7 years in the United States Air Force were spent in Washington, D.C. And I can't tell you how many trips I made over to Arlington National Cemetery. I've lost count. I can count how many steps it is from the visitor center to the graves of Cliff Bland and Dixon Walters, our co-pilot and electronic warfare officer in Spirit 03. I think I could count the steps. I can walk there. I can give the tour. So those family members are out there and you wondered why there were stones on top of their grave sites, those were stones that we left. Every time my son would come to Washington, D.C., he said, "Dad, we got to go see the Spirit 03 guys." They represented all of you, the two of them, by the way. They represented the crew because those two were the ones that were buried at Arlington. So we went to see the Spirit 03. The best photo that I have, my favorite photo that I have of my son and I is standing in the rain with an umbrella over the grave sites of our Spirit 03 crew members. Because it was my son that said, "Dad, we're going." I was the guy that was going to stay in the visitor center. So, "Dad, we got an umbrella, we're going." And we walked those steps and we stood in the rain. I have a picture of it. His girlfriend took it. It's the proudest moment. I just want the family members to know we will never forget the members of Spirit 03 as long as we're on this planet. Thank you for the opportunity, Murph and Paul, for allowing me to make a few comments to the families. I'm going to turn it over back to you now.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Highhill, for those remarks. As we remember the courage and bravery of the crew of Spirit 03, I ask that we bow our heads in a moment of silence and reflect upon their sacrifice to our great nation. Thank you. I'd now like to offer a toast to the crew of Spirit 03. Let us give thanks for the many blessings we have received. Let us give thanks for the security of the United States, for the freedoms we enjoy and experience every day. However, let us recognize the great price that has been paid for that freedom. They lived, they felt, they were vibrant, as energetic, as immortal as you and I. They were brave. They fell for peace and for freedom in the service of their country. Many may argue about the futility of death and of war, but one should never forget that they died not in vain, but in honor. Many times through the years, our country has called, and many men and women have answered the call. Let us not forget our fallen comrades, but remember them always, for they have earned our respect and admiration with their lives. We knew them, we remember them, and they will not be forgotten. To our fallen comrades, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I introduce Lieutenant General Jim Slife, Commander, Air Force Special Operations Command. Sir.
Thanks, Colonel Andrews, and thanks to both you and Colonel Murphy for setting this up this evening. Chief Walter, thanks for the narration of the details of that day 30 years ago. For those that may not have been familiar with all the details, we really appreciate it. General Heithold, as always, one of the most inspirational speakers AFSOC's ever produced. Thanks for sharing some of your words with us this evening. You know, post-Desert Storm combat operations, not just for gunships, but really for all of AFSOC, has been shaped by the loss of the crew of Spirit 03. There hasn't been an AFSOC combat commander in the last 3 decades who didn't know the story and internalize its lessons. The fact that in the tens of thousands of hours of combat flying that we've done since 9/11, in the most gunship-centric period in the 77-year history of Air Force Special Operations, we haven't lost a single gunship is a testament to the lasting contribution these men's lives made on every air commando who followed in their footsteps. But just as the loss of Spirit 03 marked one of the darkest days in gunship history, I can confidently predict that the brightest and most relevant days of our gunship force still lie ahead. With no hyperbole, I can say that the commanders and senior enlisted leaders who serve as the shepherds for this storied AFSOC community today are unsurpassed across all of AFSOC in terms of their vision for the future, their professionalism, and the steely-eyed mission focus they imbue into their squadrons. With deep respect to the gunship leaders who preceded them, I humbly say that none of us could have held a candle to the ones that you grew to guide today's force to the future. But their clear view towards a rapidly changing future operating environment is grounded in a deep reverence for the history of the tight-knit gunship community of which they're a part. I believe it's this reverence and a burning desire to honor the legacies of those that came before them, which not only ignites their passion for the future, but also causes them to honor those who sacrificed their futures for those who followed. the crew of Spirit 03 in the first rank of those patriots. As we close this evening's event, allow me to say thank you all for giving me the opportunity to join you tonight in honoring the memory of the crew of Spirit 03. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Sly, for those remarks. I'd like to thank all the distinguished guests, key speakers, former commanders and chiefs, Gunship Nation, and most importantly, the families of the crew of Spirit 03 for joining us tonight as we reflect upon their courageous actions 30 years ago today. This concludes today's ceremony. We would like to offer that the Zoom room will remain open for 30 to 45 minutes for those wishing to exchange pleasantries and catch up with one another. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Murph. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, James. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Cliff, I know you're on. I think I saw Pete as well. For all those squadron commanders, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys joining us.
Just for your information, I'm Larry Peterson with the 16th SOS from 1972 to 74. And I've been honored this past year to be part of the Honor Bell team, and which serves out of Denver, Colorado at Fort Logan. We have a 1,000-pound bell that we toll as our veterans are interned at Fort Logan. On Monday afternoon, I will be tolling for the Spirit 03 crew, and I will have Bill, I will pass that video on to Bill, and I'll have him post it for you, for all of you to see. But I am honored to do this for them.
Thank you, sir.
If I can, I'd like to say a few words from the Grimm family. Really, thanks to everybody who has set this up. It's very touching to our heart. It's hard to believe 30 years have gone by this quickly. We miss William, of course, with all of our heart. We think of him every day. And we're a military family. There was actually two Captain Grimms, William and his brother James, Lieutenant Colonel, which is myself. I spent 24 years in the Army. Of course, all the boys were all Air Force. They caught on real quick after seeing the Army life. And now we have one active duty also, William's brother John, and he's a colonel in the Air Force. So I want to thank you all. It's just wonderful. It's so touching for us in the families, and you just don't know how much it all means to us that you guys just never forget and continue honoring the crew of Spirit 03. Thank you very much from the Grimm family.
Hey, great to see you again, sir.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. From the this is Jason Galvin, Art Galvin's son, from St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Really appreciate that. Got the whole crew of my family over here watching, and family out in Arizona and probably Florida. So thank you so much.
Hey, Jason, Bill here. My, you've grown. Hey, good to see you, man.
Thank you.
I just want to thank, on behalf of my family, my mom, Dee Dee McMahon, and my family, thank you all so much for my brother Cliff, for everyone remembering him for so long. It's truly wonderful. And I ran into a couple of guys at Arlington today, which was fantastic. I was about to leave. My mom had already left, and it was Dar and John Easley, and whom I'd never met before, but I saw people walking what seemed purposefully towards the area, and so I stopped and got out, and the sad thing was that my mom had driven away with the bourbon, and theirs was they couldn't bring theirs in to toast Cliff, and it was really wonderful to meet them and just to know that everyone keeps the memory alive. So thank you.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we sure can.
I can. I'm Mark's youngest sister, Janet. And I was 11 years old when he died. So it's just insane he's been gone that long. I'm at work, so. And I can't find my stupid face mask. I kind of needed it. So I would have loved my dad to have seen this, but he just turned 80. The crazy thing is, he turned 83 today on the 30th anniversary of my brother dying. And he's not very technologically, knows how to push buttons and stuff. So I wish he'd have been here, but I showed him how to do it, but he doesn't know. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen Stephen and Wayne in here. Stephen and Wayne are his sons. Stephen's a school teacher now, and he lives in Texas, and I don't get to see my baby no more. I basically raised that boy from a child, and I remember when he was a little baby. Boy, how time flies. I swear. So, but it was nice meeting everyone, but I have to get back to work. I get off at 10.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you showing up, and it's great to hear from you.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world. The only reason I knew about this is because my sister's daughter, Lacey, told me about it. Unfortunately, Debbie died last May, and Mark and Debbie were thick as thieves. Debbie never really got over my brother dying. It devastated her. It completely devastated her. And I think that probably contributed to her dying, because grief, if you don't let go of grief, it will eat you alive. So, but it was nice meeting everyone. I have to get back to work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Beth Onspa. My husband was Tech Sergeant John Olschlager. I want to thank you all for remembering my husband and all the other men on Spirit 03. And I thank you for the service that you all have given to the Air Force and to the military and to our families. God bless y'all. Thank you.
Yes, yesterday I was going to Hurlburt, and you have a sign there that was reminding people of 03. And what was so funny,
Ma'am, you might be on mute.
yes, it was giving me, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, I sure can.
Okay. Anyway, it was going on Hurlburt, and you all have a neon sign as you're coming into the back gate. Yet it said remembering 03. And as I come up to the sign, it had Clark. And as I passed the sign and I looked in my rearview mirror, it said James May. And it just hit me. This is, I guess it's like every year, and it has been 30 years, you would think, but this period of time is just melancholy, and I do appreciate that this is going on, so thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
How are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, sir, we sure are.
Yes, I am Mark's youngest son. I am here, actually. I want to thank you guys for honoring my father. It was a great honor to be here and remembering the sacrifices that my father has made. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi. My name is Michelle Kogan. I'm John Blessinger's daughter. And I just want to say thank you guys for remembering each year and for celebrating the lives of my father and the rest of the crew. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Michelle. And I think you might have reached out to the command, and we're working on something to replace the valuables I think you guys lost in the wildfire.
My
Should be
sister.
sending that here shortly.
Yep, that's my sister.
Okay.
So I'll let her know.
Perfect. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank
Bill
again,
Walter.
everyone. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Chief.
Hey, sir, I just wanted to thank you guys for putting this all together. I mean, from the Spectre Association, we really appreciate it. You know, we're just a bunch of old codgers, but you know, we still feel like we're part of the team, and the support that we see for the families. You know, we're all one big group. So, I kudos to everybody that put this together, and thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thanks again, Chief. Thanks everyone for attending. For the family members that spoke at the end, thanks for that very touching element to all this. Again, I appreciate everyone spending time on a Saturday evening to pay remembrance to the crew. At this point, I'm going to jump off, but I'm going to leave the room open for anyone that wants to continue chatting and obviously sharing the crew's legacy.
Yeah, Murph, Charlie Holland, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I sure can. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, I tell you, it's a great event, great memories of fallen comrades. And since we've all been together for many, many years, Spirit 03 has been in the hearts of all of the families. It's been in the hearts of all of us. And I remember well when we brought all of the families together 1 year after that, when I was the South Commander. And so it's good to see the families there. And I really appreciate what you and General Heitholt, General Slife, and of course the Chief, with all of his historical perspective, what you have brought together and what's the meaning behind why we do what we do. So again, Murph, thanks for getting in touch with me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.